Continuing on with part 2 of our lecture. Estimating time is more an art than a science. It is based on so many factors, many of which can be hard to predict. Generally, for each activity and task, there are 2 types of measurements. Elapsed time, this is how long it takes for an activity or task to be completed. Work time, this is how long it takes for you or others to do the work. Work can often be reduced if additional people are available to help on the project. Most projects are planned with some contingency time built in. This can be added in as a percentage of time for each activity, or some additional time allotted for each deliverable. With all of the information that you have on hand, it is now possible to build the schedule. The project schedule can now be moved into a Gantt chart, spreadsheet, or any scheduling software, which will visually correlate the milestones, activities, and tasks. Each deliverable may need its own schedule chart. Again, you can use any application you like. You will be required to complete a Gantt chart for the project. You worked on your initiating phase document in class this week and the student project plan. You created a list of resources already on hand. The list you create now will focus on what other resources you need and how you will acquire them. Resources are the things needed for a project, including money, materials, space, and equipment. Planning the resources is critical to ensure that everything can be acquired for the project. If not, this is the time to make revisions to the plan. For each resource, you must determine how it will be acquired. This could be a purchase or something that you borrow, something that your school or team members already own. Resource planning means considering all the things needed to complete the project. This might be person hours, money, physical space, supplies, or equipment. When considering resources, it is useful to pair them up with the schedule. When do you need each specific resource and for how long? Is acquiring the resource an activity that should be added to the task list? Ask your group this question. Will the resource require you to allow elapsed time in your schedule? If you have some pressing deadlines, you can trade off time for money in your budget, for example. While you consider your resources, again, time, people, supplies, funds, you will also be determining where or how you will get what you need. This is called procurement. What is risk? What is risk management? We had a absolutely great presentation with Linda this week in class. She really talked about some practical approaches that she uses for risk management. She gave us some good analogies and some good examples. This involves considering, again, the worst case scenario for each milestone or activity, depending on the scope of your project, and then planning how to negate or address the risk. We want to neutralize it, cancel it, and nullify it. Risk may be related to project processes, as well as the day-to-day activities to complete the project. How likely is it to happen? This can be characterized as a percentage or ratio. For example, is it a 50-50 chance, or is it high, medium, or low? However, considering and assigning a value will in part determine how many resources should be put toward averting the negative event or outcome. During our presentation with Linda, she showed us her spreadsheet that she uses for her risk log and how detailed it is and how important to include the right amount of details. Which parts of the project might be affected by the negative event? Assessing the implications of a negative event is also helpful when determining how important it is to avoid it. A negative event may have an impact in one or more areas of the project. Resources. This is any combination of people, equipment, funding, or other resources. Timing. When deliverables or the entire project will be completed. Scope. Completing and delivering all the items named in the original scope. Quality. How well each deliverable or the whole project meets its goals. In the planning phase, it is critical to think about things that might go wrong. When potential risks are identified, the possibility of them occurring can be reduced, or at least their impact may be minimized. It may be challenging to predict and anticipate what might go wrong before you actually start the project. However, try to imagine you are doing the project and what could possibly affect the success of your project, such as issues with time and other resources, a change in scope, going over budget, something not working, and so forth. Consider adding a quality risk manager as part of your team to lead the development of the plan. Once the risk level and areas of impact have been assessed, each risk can be paired with a corresponding plan to address. This may mean identifying what can be done to reduce the possibility and or what can be done to reduce the impact if the negative event occurs. Sometimes as part of the risk management plan, there are resources allocated for contingency, setting aside time, funds, and other resources to be used only for unplanned events. Planning for risk. This involves considering the worst case scenario for each milestone or activity, depending on the scope of your project, and then planning how to negate or address the risk. Each part of the planning phase informs the other. As you list milestones, connect activities and tasks. You may revisit schedule and even return to the defining section of your student project document to make changes. Use the iterative process. This is part of your monitoring and controlling for the project. Consider adding the monitoring and controlling management person to your team. They are going to do an ongoing check-in on both the process itself as well as the progress towards your end goal, and will be used at every step of your project. So when we talk about the iterative process, we're talking about we might have to go back and repeat something. So think about assigning each person a project management role. You're going to have your main project manager, then you're going to have a monitoring and controlling manager, a quality and risk manager, a budget manager, a schedule manager. Each person on the team must have a vital role. Each person must be actively participating in the group and facilitating each one of these complex areas of management. So as we jump back into our Blackboard site, added some announcements. Chapter 12 is our last chapter that we're going to be reviewing. This is all about project communication and documentation. I've updated the assignments area for next week, so I'm going to jump over to assignments. Going to scroll down to the very bottom portion of the screen, week 10, chapter 12. You'll notice there are 3 assignments for next week. Chapter 10, you have your reading. I've included the PowerPoint decks for each presentation. We have your part 1 and part 2 of the lecture covering the project planning document. Actually, I don't have a recorded lecture for chapter 12. It's an easy read, so I've just included the PowerPoint. Muddiest points, it's an easy place to get 5 points each week. Muddiest points cannot be turned in late. They really drive some of the activities that we do each week. So unless you've had permission, these need to be completed before next week. And then your assignment is to work within your assigned groups to create a weekly agenda. So you need an agenda of items and tasks that your group is going to work on next week to complete on 3/19. You can reference figure 12.1 in the textbook on page 405. Your timeline will be part of the part 2 of the class, 6:30 to 7:30. So upload your file here. We'll review the tools in your Blackboard group next week. So part of the assignment is to write down each amount of time for each agenda item. So maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes. That's what you're really expecting to spend on each item. So you really want to allocate time in that 60 minutes for each area. Each group member must have an item that they're responsible for and they're facilitating, leading the discussion on. Next week, you'll add the action that you're taking for each item. So I'm going to be, as you're meeting with your groups, I'm going to be working with you individually. I'm going to be observing who's leading which area of your agenda. So to get your participation points, again, everybody must be actively participating. It is not one person's responsibility to be doing all the work. So have a great week. It looks like it's warming up. We're one day closer to spring.